You're watching CBC News Network. I'm Rashmi Nair. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission is wrapping up 6 years of hearings with a number of events beginning this weekend in Ottawa. The commission will release its final report into the residential school system on Tuesday. The chair of the commission, Justice Murray Sinclair, says at least 6,000 Indigenous children died in the residential school system. The actual number is believed to be much higher.
Children who were taken away from their families and placed in residential schools were demeaned from the beginning, and they were treated as though they were subhuman, in some cases non-human.
Now, today, thousands of people are expected to take part in ceremonies and a march in Ottawa ahead of the release of the Commission's report. Mayana Slobodian has been following this topic closely. She's a doctoral student at the University of Toronto who researches Indigenous issues. And Mayana joins us here in studio. Thanks for coming in this morning. We read your op-ed. We want our viewers to understand it as well. This op-ed was picked up by Canadian media. What was your message in that editorial piece?
Well, I think what I realized is one of the biggest misconceptions about the Truth Commission is that it was started by Ottawa, maybe as a PR move or, as a response to the official apology. But, it really wasn't. It came out of the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, and it was insisted on by the survivors of residential school system. And really the biggest thing is it's paid by them as well. So this isn't Ottawa kind of paying for this. This is Ottawa being forced into this Truth Commission. And I think for that reason, we've seen a lot of resistance from Ottawa to be involved in the process.
Mm-hmm. So what would have prompted you to write that? Was it the resistance?
Yeah, well, I think it's also, there's been a lot of skepticism on all sides when it comes to the Truth Commission. And I think that it's important for us to realize, what the residential school system was really intended to do. We have this idea that it was a cultural project, that it was about Christianizing Indigenous people. But I think we need to remember that it was, as much as it was that, it was also about dismantling the economic and political kind of basis of Indigenous life. And I think that that's something that we forget about sometimes when we talk about the discourse of residential schools, because we think about the legacy, we think about the trauma, but we forget about the really practical implications of residential schools.
Mm-hmm. And now the headline that we're focusing on is the 6,000 Indigenous students that we're being told about, and some say that the number would be higher than that. Do you think there are other revelations that Canadians will or should learn from this report?
Well, I think one of the things we're going to realize is that the residential school system was genocide. And it was not only cultural genocide. Under the UN definition of genocide, it clearly states that the forcible removal of children counts as genocide when the intent is to destroy that community. And that really was the intent of the residential school systems. This wasn't simply about educating or about reforming. This was about removing Indigenous people as a barrier to Canadian expansion.
And so moving forward, when this report is presented on Tuesday, what would be ideal for you in that report?
Well, I hope that the report focuses not only on the past, on the wrongs that the Canadian government and that we as Canadians have done to Indigenous people, but also about how this persists in the present. When we see policy like the tough on crime legislation, when we see our government strong-arming First Nations communities into oil and gas development, I think what we're seeing is a continuation of the logic which really sees Indigenous people as a barrier, as a problem, as something in the way. And I hope that what we see in the final report is not only a focus on the past, but also a focus on, how these policies that we have in the present really continue that really wrong-headed way of thinking about where we live.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming in to speak with us about it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
That's Mayana Slobodian, a doctoral student at the University of Toronto, joining us here in studio.
Thanks.